as promised, I am interviewing my good friend, Pastor Danny Givens, who has now released an art project of note. If you have never heard of a street novel from the Rondo Community, St. Paul, Minnesota, which is at the head of the America's public ethos right now when it comes to Black people. You see all of this police brutality and conflict with Black Lives Matter. What I've noticed being from there is that nobody's actually talking about the way Black people are living in Minnesota. Like, I'm from this. But when I heard your project, Danny, that's the story that I know. Yeah. It doesn't encompass everybody's story, but that's what the big facts are, beyond the politics. We don't need to get into the politics today, but I really, really wanted to talk to you, brother, because I enjoyed your story. The way I look at, I'm a hip hop head. Yeah. 1975, we didn't listen to much outside of hip hop after Sugar Hill Gang.
For real.
But we were the generation of people that were doing what this generation talks about that it's doing, for good or bad. Mm-hmm. But your story is, from my ears, a novelistic version of what encompassed that time. Yeah. Like you say, I think it's from about 87 to like 96.
Yeah.
How that era shaped the adult man that you've become and informs this particular project. This project is not a preachy project. This is actually, man, this is in the hood. This is, but it's a great work. Like, honestly, as a listener, like, I appreciate, this is banging. When I first heard it, I called my brother, who was like, did you hear that? And we were going back and forth like on some hip hop shit. Like, this nigga actually is banging out on this, and it's dope. Not to we're gonna leave aside the fact that you're 43 now, 43-year-old freshman rapper bombing on this, bombing on them.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna belabor the point. We're gonna get off into it, but I want you to introduce yourself to the audience who may not know your story, so that we can talk about how complex some of the intricacies of this album are and where it's going. Yeah. For people who aren't just going to give it a fair listen, they need to know what they're getting into.
True. And I appreciate that question. I mean, I come from, a really complex background, being raised in, my family is 5 generations deep in the Rondo community. My family originally made their migration north in the latter part of the 50s, and my great-grandmother actually lost a house to the I-94, interstate, or what they call the serial displacement, right? Racialized serial displacement, right? And so, coming up from Rondo and having, in our community, it was a very working class community, but it was a montage of all of us that were present there for sure. And my mom was this middle child of 12 children, come from two of the biggest families in the Twin Cities. And my mom was younger. She was like, yo, I'm through with this, invisible child syndrome, right? Being a middle child, I don't have to be seen, so I'm out of here. And, she graduated high school and had me, met my dad and had me. And, she set out to raise me to be, like I think most parents do, raise me to be, a child better than who she ever, was or could dream of being. And, it happened. I won't go too deep into it, but I ended up having to, my mom had raised us like in the outskirts of Rondo. Because she wanted to get away from just the saturation of our family. Like, I mean, she's got 11 siblings, and of those 11 siblings, I mean, my grandmother literally, rest her soul, before she passed away, I mean, it was documented of her having 200 plus grandchildren, 100 and something plus great grandchildren, and up into the 50s of great. So like, my family is really big. And so my mom's like, I want my son to have, autonomy, right? Have the pressure of having to fit in, if you will, or assimilate into a culture or family dynamic that she didn't identify with as much. And so we ended up having to move back into the hood, if you will, or back into, Rondo when I was 10. And that's where you hear on the song Prophecy, that, I stayed in the house, I see my first cake in the kitchen. My uncle was downstairs cooking up, like it was that thing. And I got exposed to something different, in the context of, my adolescence. And, moving from the suburbs, if you will, to the inner city, whereas like the things that are like novelty now, right, to do like skateboarding and hacky sack or, frisbee football, whatever that is, like that stuff was like frowned upon as, or at least wasn't like something that was socially acceptable in, predominantly Black communities. So this is what I used to do. I knew how to cross country ski. I knew how to BMX bike, and, hacky sack, all that before that was cool. I come into the hood and, niggas is like, man, we hooky bobbing cars. We put rocks inside of snowballs, fam. And I can say that
is 95% white until you get to the hood. That 5% is all in the hood,
man. Right there. And so it was a different thing. And, and this was in the height of Reagan era, Reaganomics, and, the displacement of our fathers. My father had got displaced as a result of Reaganomics and the crack epidemic and era. And so my father, returns back home in 87 after doing a fair bit. And, everything is just kind of percolating in our community. I mean, for Rondo, like this is, man, the money trees, the Olympics, the hood Olympics that, the big time drug dealers was having, and, snipes them riding down Selby, throwing money out the roof, and like, having us do track and field, all that, right? So this is the height of that, I mean, it was our version, if you will, of Paid in Full, right? Of Harlem, right? Yeah. And I was like, okay, man, what do I do? Like, I don't necessarily come from this, but I'm familiar with it. Fast forward, I got into the life. And at the same time, my mother was so heavy on me around, she pressed education. She pressed me being able to speak the King's English. I had, book reports and words of the day and spelling bees in addition to my own schoolwork right there in the hood. Like I legit couldn't leave the house until my schoolwork was done. And she checked it. If she wasn't at work, like you wasn't going outside. If she was at work, you wasn't going outside until she got home. And so she pressed that into me. And so I had these two worldviews, if you will, right? One of, knowing how to navigate the society in a way to succeed via, hard work and, academic, success. And then the other side is I had this other narrative of legacy of my family that was super deep and entrenched into criminality and the street life. And that's what it was. And so I did this dance, I double dutched the entirety of my teenage years, my pubescent years, leading on up. So like, I used to get teased for talking proper. I have a white name, Danny, you know what I'm saying? Like all this stuff. Like I would, I had to, it's what W.E.B. Du Bois talks about this, this dual consciousness, right? Of having to be, these two seemingly, paradoxical things. And at the same time, still trying to find out how to be me in this world. So for what made sense though, in it all was hip hop. Like what was the medium that, because on the one side, being educated, understanding, vernacular, and the other side, being versed in the streets, like I could listen to a Cool G rap, right? I could listen to a Eric B, if you will. I could listen to a Too Short. I could listen to an Ice Cube and still, have this embodiment of, culture in me. And so I grew up in an era where, the music shaped and informed. So I loved it. I started writing when I was 13 years old. My cousins was rapping and, they taught me how to write bars. I was a whack ass rapper. I was whack, super whack. And I recorded my first song, my first single, maybe 3 or 4 days before I committed the crime that I ended up in prison for. And it was, in the same kind of a vein of like, either third person or like real-time storytelling. And when I went to prison, the thing that was my sanity, and I don't mean to be cliche or any of that, but what was my saving grace in prison was the fact that we had access to music. Man, you could lock us up for 21 days straight and we can't come out but an hour a day, but please keep that radio, keep this music popping. And that's what helped me. And in the prison I was in, they had a band room. And so They had this old school program, an old school keyboard, an old 4-track Fostex. It was a tape cassette recorder. And we down there working it. And so that's what kept me grounded, was my music. That's what kept me like from, you know, when I had suicidal ideations, serving a 12-year prison sentence. You know, I went to prison in a wheelchair, bro. You know, was shot on my case. So
Whoa,
you know
I know that. No,
yeah, I was, you know, I was shot on my case, man. I was in a wheelchair for the first 4.5 months of, you know, of everything. And I, you know, couldn't stand it. Like that's a whole nother story. But like music created this space for me even to navigate prison without, you know, the harmful effects that you would go through, right? And then I'll close out the question with saying that I changed my life while I was in prison. You know, it was 6 years in, and you know, I accepted a calling that, you know, was preached over my life when I was a young boy. I, you know, always grew up in church, that kind of stuff, and so I was like, man, the hardest thing, my brother, for me to give up when I changed my life, you know, and this is accepting this old, you know, kind of conservative, legalistic perspective, right, of approach to faith or spirituality, if you will, that, you know, you got to give up something. You know, the creator gave up something for you got to give up something, right? And cussing was cool. I didn't have, you know, I'll stop cussing, fine, that's easy. You know, robbing people, hurting people, cool. But my thing with this rap music, bro, this hip hop, I mourned, I grieved. I'm serious. I mourned and I grieved, man, while I was in prison, because I didn't listen to hip hop for like 4.5 years, thinking that, you know, I was on some other stuff, bro. You know, I accepted a different narrative. And I remember the day I first listened to a rap song for the first time. It was "Welcome Back" by Mace.
Ironic.
You know, and I was like, oh, okay, you know, this could happen. And you know, I rock with gospel rap. I rock with, you know, I think that stuff is dope. I think that that's an amazing genre. But for me, it was like, and I mourned it. I wrote my life story while I was in prison. And I was like, man, there's 1,000 books out here, 1,000,000 books out here about, you know, a brother that done been through a situation and, you know, navigated it, came back, like this love, like, you know, and it didn't feel like this. When I got to writing the book, it didn't feel like the kind of completion I thought I would feel in, you know, telling a portion of my story. So I started writing autobiographical hip hop. And it wasn't that I sat down and intended to write it. It literally, you know, I'm a extemporaneous speaker. And so with that, I'm blessed with that gift in all modesty. And this music, these literary pieces, these compositions come to me in the same way. I suffer from insomnia. So a lot of times I'm up late at night and all of a sudden this stuff just comes to me. And that's why it's conveyed so, you know, so eloquently, if you will, in the music. You can feel from the, you know, the intonations of my voice, from, you know, me, the breathiness of it is on purpose, right?
Yeah.
It's not, I'm not trying to be this polished. I want you to feel like, yeah, I'm out of breath rapping this shit.
Yeah, that's passion. That there is rhetorically a connection between the pulpit or the preacher, the black preacher, and the rapper. That whole intonation, that call and response, like that
yeah.
Take Meek Mill, for example.
Yeah.
His style, all that is shouting.
Yeah.
That's where that comes from.
Yeah.
James Cone, his work on black music that connects hip hop to the slave songs and moves through the church.
Talk about
rhetorically, that's the same thing that's going on now. If we as audience members appreciate the sophistication of our listening ears and our understanding of the world, and appreciate the sophistication that goes into the construction of that particular type of narrative, that genre. The only difference between what you're doing on Wax and Donald Goines as a novelist, I would argue, is an appreciation of the novelistic genre that you chose to communicate within.
Yeah.
Novels at the time were considered high literature, but that's only because it was codified as that by the dominant culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hip hop is one of the biggest, if not the biggest musical genres out right now, but it's still underappreciated for its artistic value because of the dominant narrative that surrounds it. However, when time washes out, both are going to be considered in their purest forms art, in my opinion.
I agree. And, and echoing in the same vein that you're talking about with this, with the oppressive, nature of whiteness and the indictment of, the ancestral drum, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's something about that 808, right? And riding it, much like we did, or we do still, to this day in the motherland, where it's a call of celebration. It can announce birth, it can announce war, it can announce grief, it could, invite, invocation. There's so many different facets that the drum, coupled with voice and melody, and rhythm, has been, this is just who we are. And because of the oppressive forces of whiteness and dominant culture, find that to be a threat. I couldn't imagine, right? Like on some real spill, like I got a crazy, weird kind of way of like tapping back in, because I think about like, man, I couldn't imagine, the kind of fear of hearing, our people, as they were invading, announcing the cry and the drum, you know what I'm saying? Sing the song, whatever that was, and we're not blessed with the real narrative or the documentation of it that supports it. But I know our people weren't silent, and I think that same drum, just how they came at NWA, just as they came at Eazy, Ice-T, and others for this particular form. I love the juxtaposition of Donald Goines, or just the literary form of writing, right? Because if I wrote my life story in a series of novels, in a series of memoirs, an autobiography, whatever that is, I mean, I believe people wouldn't have a problem with it. I can cuss, I can do all that, right? If I chose the medium of playwright, and acted it out in a series of, sonnets as Othello, right?
Yeah.
It would be,
wow, he's a genius.
It's so sensational, right? If I was a filmmaker and I dropped it on the silver screen, like Reuben Hurricane Carter, and all of its splendor and everything, like people would be like, wow, he really bare it all. But something about that drum, it's like, if I was an R&B singer,
scary. Yeah, exactly.
If I was an R&B singer, like, oh man, you had the pastor singing his ass off, right? Oh my God, I could do folk music. They wouldn't have a problem with me, bro.
Is this particular genre?
It's
you hit on something. It's that 808. It's that drum.
Yeah.
It signifies to most of us who listen to it inspiration, but also that inspiration, keeping in mind the dominant culture. That's war. It could be war. Thomas Jefferson said a long time ago, and this is the way Black people been framed in American and the normative American vision since. African Americans can't be but one of two things, according to white people. Either an imitation, like a subordinate imitation of white people and whiteness, or a threat to it. If Jeff is reading and he ain't reading the Bible the way we want him to read it, he's Nat Turner. That reverberates throughout the culture and the experience.
Yeah, definitely.
But hold up, if I'm not mistaken, all right, this story that you're telling is the way I took it growing up a child of Rondo. I'm like you, when you say your family goes back 5 generations, ain't that many generations in Rondo. Minnesota was only founded in 1852. As far as my family goes back, we go back to when we were mating with natives. Up until 1980, right? Wow. There wasn't nothing but 70,000 Black people in Minnesota. That ain't a lot of people. That's less than a city.
That's a concert, a football game.
Black people in Minnesota we're a small town in a big city.
True.
We're all interconnected. And your story, when I heard it, as much as I love the genre of hip hop, I love the art of hip hop storytelling. I finally got to hear a story that I was included in. Like for real. When I talked to my brother Jamie, and I was like, "Have you listened to Danny's album?" He was like, "Is he talking about us?" I was like, "Yeah, but not directly, but yeah," because everything he's talking about, it occurs from about, what'd you say, 87 to 96?
Yeah.
You was living right next door to this dude when most of this stuff is popping off. You saw most of this stuff that he's talking about, and you know a lot of the names, a lot of the nicknames that you dropped. Not on no dry snitching shit, but just these is hood facts. I know these people. I know their governments. I went to kindergarten with these people.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When you said Bougie, I was like, damn, I ain't seen Bougie in years. Like,
Yeah.
I ain't seen them in years. Like, these people, these characters are what shaped our very small community. Like, and the way that you did it, it's not that it was designed to say that you're in the life, like currently, but this happens in this space. And this, like, this is a very authentic telling of the Rondo narrative.
Yeah.
The way that I was reading it, right, in my head is I'm contrasting it with Remembering Rondo. There was the novel, I forget what the sister's name is. She wrote it about her experience growing up from maybe in the 40s.
The Pink Book. That was the first book I read about Rondo. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And it's that story, which is a very good telling of Rondo before the highway divided us, is also a story about how wrapped up Black people were in the politics of respectability. We have to, in order for our survival, comport ourselves to normative society, which your mama was trying to push you into.
Yeah, for sure.
But your story, I contrasted with it because it says, this is the pushback. This is the hip hop pushback of, nah, we're gonna do it our generation said, for better or worse. We're gonna do it our way.
Bottom line.
With whatever was given, you give us some weeds and pig entrails, we're gonna make chitlins and greens out of this. Can you, for a second, like, talk to me about some of the main stories that you talk about in there? Because those are significant hood stories. God rest his soul, Brandon Mann's passing. Your granddad, your pops, your mom's hustling. The dice game robbery. This stuff like really happened in this hood facts that kind of unpack the Rondo I remember.
Well, let me say this: that it's, first and foremost, that all of the stories are, are cathartic for me, and I, intentionally, check my pen, if you will, for grandiosity, or embellishment or ego, because it just definitely wasn't. I mean, this has been a part of my healing process to be able to tell these stories. As I said in the very opening song, Street Confessions, pray before I spit it out, I don't need the church permission. Streets notice the gospel, I break bread with all the sinners. And then I talk at the end of the song talking about how, streets know I did what I did, and they've been waiting for me to tell the story. Because I haven't. I mean, in all respectability, like, there's some pieces there that, that still, requires, street retribution from some people, right? And so just, holding these stories in, in a respectable way, just because I have the ability to tell them doesn't necessarily mean that I have like the cultural permission to, to, you know what I'm saying, to just go and just start, spewing this stuff out. And I mean, this stuff is still kind of, there's still some dissonance here for folks. So, my homeboy, rest in peace, Brandon Mann, was the first friend, like my first peer that I've ever buried. And that I speak of Brandon a lot. He just, that hit me. 1995 was the hardest year of my life. Like 94, 95, 1995 was the hardest year of my life. I believe, you know, my Uncle Delijah, I think, believe y'all went to school together.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, my Uncle Delijah ended up having a mental health breakdown and took the police on a high-speed chase. And
Yeah, I remember that too.
of, you know, vehicular homicide, right? I talk about Uncle Lai on the song Aces, right? Was shooting Darnell in front of our house, actually in front of your house.
Yeah.
Not in front of my house, but he shot him in front of your house, right? And me lying to the police, right? And telling them that, you know, some people came by and got at us, and then, you know, saying at the end of the song, like, they knew I was lying because there's powder burns on the homie's neck. Like, you don't get powder burns from drive-by. But, you know, you're a 15-year-old kid who understands, you know, forensic science. I mean, I wasn't out there, right? And my Uncle Lai, you know, I tell this story of, you know, him being, you know, him doing the shooting, just, you know, that type of stuff. I mean, these are stories that have shaped me, that I've held, that I've wrestled with. Brandon being murdered. So Lai went to jail in February of 95 for the vehicular homicide. 2 months later, my homeboy Rush ends up going to, you know, meet up with his guy and, you know, to do a little exchange. And unfortunately, things went bad. Fam tried to rob him, and, you know, Rush shot Fam. And, you know, so now Rush has got, you know, he's in jail for murder. I'm at the time, I just got kicked out of Highland High School for, you know, selling drugs on campus, you know, and I had got accepted. The last high school I got accepted in, I started out at St. Agnes, right, for 2 years. The last high school I got accepted at was Como Park, and it was literally the last 2.5 months of high school, bro. So when I talk about, you know, 35 days before graduating, I carried my homeboy, like, I'm in the very throes of PTSD as it's happening. Not, you know, it didn't post, it's right? And I'm trying to graduate high school. My entire peer group is, you know, dissipating, if you will, right? Now Lai's gone, Rush is in jail fighting a murder. I'm in treatment, outpatient treatment, so I can't get in the game like I want to. I got UAs and a probation officer. Brandon drops me off. Treatment was at across from Miss Fletcher's on Selby and Chatsworth. I mean, Selby and Oxford. Yeah, right? So I'm saying, Brandon drops me off. He goes to the TC car wash that used to be on Lexington, right by the Dairy Queen and all that, across from there. And, you know, I'm waiting for him to pick me up, and my treatment ends at 5 o'clock. We're watching the 5 o'clock news like we normally do. And I see yellow tape surrounding TC car wash. I see Brandon's car. I don't see Brandon, but then I see his mom, my godmom, Marcy Mann, crying. And, you know, then they say, like, you know, Brandon Mann was just recently killed at the car wash. And it just was like, that's when, you know, grief gave me my first tour. You know, I went on my first journey with grief, and I compartmentalized it, right? I suppressed it. And, you know, these stories came out sideways over time, you know? And so to be able to tell them in a way that, like, yo, man, I'm still struggling with this. You know, my homeboy's death is still an unsolved murder. You know, 20 plus years later, 25, 26 years later, like, this ain't, from a street standpoint, you don't tell a story and I'm down a point, right?
Yeah.
From a street standpoint, I mean, I'm down a point. So I'm not telling this to glorify it. I'm telling to talk about, like, I've had a chance to, like, really think back and process, you know, how I carry this. My great grandfather is actually what I talk about in the album, Clarence Lindsay. My grandfather lost his life to gunfire in the 60s. But my great grandfather, Clarence Lindsay, he and my great grandmother were very influential in my life. And for those folks that, you know our city's history, they know, you know, my Lindsay side of the family, unfortunately, is known, you know, notoriously as a criminal, violent family. And that's not anything I brag about. It just is what it is. And I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but there was some Crip cats from Cali had shot up my grandma's house in broad daylight, man. It was like, and I was walking up Marshall and saw it. I was like a half a block away, and literally like 3 of these cats with submachine guns, like, I mean, it was probably 200 rounds. They pumped it to my grandma's house. And, you know, back then, the old folks from down south always kept a gun closet. And that coat closet, when you walked to my grandma's house, wasn't coats. It was locked for a reason, and there was all the guns in there. I got in line with the rest of my older cousins. I'm the baby. And everybody getting guns. And as soon as I get there, my great grandfather was like, "No, boy, you go out there on the porch with your grandmama." And I go out there, you know, and I'm active, right? I'm a little active, right? But they sent me out on the porch with my grandmother. My grandmother told me, "No, I want you to sit right here, baby." You know, now this woman was just literally just tackled off of her banister from being shot. Calm, cool, saying nah. And what she told me after all my cousins left was like, "I don't want that for you."
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so I think about, you know, not that they wanted that for them, but I know now and later in life that my grandfather, their son, the first son to be murdered, was one of their favorite children. And I was told too many times that I reminded them, you
Okay.
know, reminded me of them. And so I share those kind of stories, those
Mm-hmm.
facts that are there. You know, my cousin Bougie, who, you know, a few years older than me, but like close ties. Jones, you know, Luther Jones'
Yeah,
son,
yeah, yeah.
twins, Luther Knox. That's legendary in the Twin Cities, right? My cousin Bougie, and just, you know, you talk about like this machismo of, you know, carrying firearms, if you will. And I mentioned in the song, not to be like some super hood nigga. I mentioned the song that Booty told me, like, basically, man, if you're gonna up it, you better pop it. Like,
Yeah.
don't be out there playing no games because people will hurt you. And just, you know, just painting pictures of people having, you know, a different narrative and perspective on this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it shakes me. Me and Bougie are super close to this day. You know, he's out of the life. We both made it out. You know, I see him often. You know, and so these are the stories that shaped my life. Rest in peace, Arthur, my little cousin, little Arthur Jones, who died in my arms. You know, this is fast forward, and I'm a preacher, so new wifey, right?
Yeah.
I talk about just got off parole, stay on the go, you know, trying to find my way. You know, I went through divorce, and literally, bro, my ex-wife told me, you know, yo, you gotta go. She wasn't happy. It was, you know, depression and some other things got the best of our marriage. And, you know, it was like, you know, I'm done with this. We were struggling for infertility, all of this. So she was like, you need to go. Literally a week later, you know, my little cousin, little Arthur, who grew up like my little brother, dies in my arms in the ER, you know, and I had to facilitate a space for everyone in my family. I got 52 first, well, now 51 with him passing, right? I had 51 first cousins at that time and a ton of other seconds. And like I had to manage and navigate this space as not Danny, cousin Danny, a family member, as Pastor Danny.
Mm-hmm.
And his wife is right next to me.
Mm-hmm.
And his father, my Uncle Arthur, who is, you know, now wheelchair bound and has, you know, low mobility and mental, you know, capability. Like, you know, I'm watching my family attempt to carry this grief. And bro, there's this, I never get this image out of my mind, man. You know, I had to clear out the space so folks could, you know, they do what they do. And I remember having his wife, then wife Katrina was like, you know, I just want to say goodbye one last time. So I had the door open, let her go in. I was just kind of watching. At one point, I looked back because I heard her kind of like crying, like, "You could play the game, please. I'll let you play the game. I'm sorry. Just please wake up." And as I looked in the room, bro, she was on top of his lifeless body on the gurney, trying to, you know, flap his flailing arms around her so he could hug her one last time. And so when I say Arthur died right in front of me, Katrina cried right in front of me, watch Brenda cry right in front of me, broke my heart when Uncle Arthur weep. I ain't really had no sleep. Appetite going, I can't eat. Losing sight, I can't see me. Fighting with the enemy. You know, like all this is happening. My church is splitting. Like I said, church split, they talking about me. My ex-wife lying, they thinking I done cheated and did some more shit. And it's just, yo, this shit didn't work. But, you know, I'm old school. You don't talk about it.
Like, that's what I'm saying.
Let me plug this laptop in. I hear you.
Okay. Well,
I'm here.
I'm glad you mentioned that because all of it's real facts. But new wifey, like that one that fast forwards into the Pastor Dan out of prison life.
Yeah.
That space in between post prison and now. And it was a journey for you. And one thing I love about you, brother, you are very public in your journey.
Yes.
I mean, I was getting pictures of Lil Dan right like the year before you came out. But at the same time, everybody, whole hood, everybody knows Lil Dan. You had to get the world adjusted to the grown man Danny Givens.
Yeah.
And what we learned and what we had to readjust our eyes to in that 12 years was Little Dan to Pastor Dan. That's like You went from first gear to fifth gear, and we got to accept this.
Yeah.
And everybody is sitting there going back and forth about what this means. But you as a man had to negotiate that space. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's our struggle. That's the human struggle. And a matter of fact, that is indicative of a faith-driven life. When God gives you a calling, it isn't to make you perfect or for you to be the shining hill on the example. No, you in the soil with everybody else, and I need you to be in the soil with them,
Yeah.
so that they can see me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And in the song Wifey, you disclose a lot of the contradictions
Yeah.
that you were living through. But
Yeah.
it doesn't, like you said, one thing that makes this novelistic is that you're not glorifying any of it. You're like, I'm a conflicted person, and this me.
Yeah. Yeah.
New Wifey does that, and there's the one. Is that your prison number? What is that?
Yeah. My OID number, 1896.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The songs like that, for me as a listener, I get to walk through that world and through your eyes. That's what that is unique about hip hop and the I narrative. It forces audience members to identify with the narrative.
Yeah.
Either as walking next to the narrator or walking as the narrator. Why did you choose to put songs like that on this project?
Again, it's a part of my healing. New Wifey, I was literally I was silent for years, and I still haven't like went out publicly. I mean, just out of respect for, a covenant and, a vow that I made before my creator with another human being, like, despite how it ended, I just can't go and just be, flamboyant or flipping at the mouth about it, and even though that was some of the energy that I got, I was like, man, my mama ain't cut like that. I don't want that kind of energy to come back either. And so New Wifey was this piece where I had an opportunity to invite people, like, because when you're a leader or any kind of space of like be in the public eye, or folks view you as such, or if you have the vocation of a leader, like it's unfortunate that people, I can't say it's unfortunate, the disservice that leaders do, I won't put it on the people, it's the leaders' fault. The disservice that leaders do is that we show our audiences and or the public how well we could lead while covering up all the places where we bleed. And T. Jakes talks about that, right? Leading while bleeding. And for me, when you ask me why am I sharing? Almost like a tell-all, right? I found out a secret for me with Danny Givens, that the key to my healing and my primary form of self-care is transparency. That's what got me in trouble. I just wouldn't tell my mama the real. Like I said on the song Double Life, right? Transparency. So I was like, yo, let me be transparent and not paint a picture, because New Wifey wasn't this. I wasn't trying to, set up a background for people to feel sorry and say, oh, poor Danny. Damn, people died. His marriage failed. He started drinking. He was clubbing. He valet messed his car, all this sort of stuff, right? It was about, I wanted you to get an opportunity to get a picture, get a glimpse of my journey, right? Yeah. I mean, it's that old adage, the glory and not the story. And I'm just blessed to be given the kind of courage to tell the story. Like, you know what, this is it. And I learned this, that, if you tell on yourself, I mean, ain't no more to tell. You know what I'm saying? And so I had to bear it all in that sense. And I had to articulate in a way. I mean, it wasn't just talking about, I was a lot packed into New Wifey. I talk about, got off parole. This is supposed to be a high time in my life, right? And I'm moving around. All these things are happening. I'm doing great, but y'all see that, okay, Pastor Danny's traveling with his wife. He's enjoying himself. He's raising his family. Y'all don't know that, brokenhearted, I lost everything. Repoed my car, sold my wedding ring. This is shit I thought I'd never see. I got put out. I'm at Mama's B. Like, that's the antithetical black male narrative. I got 2 brand new cars parked in front of Fifth Street, bro. You know what I'm saying? In my mama's house. Like, come on, this nigga still stay with his mama. This is his thing. I thought I'd never see. I got put up at my mama's B, lost my job back in October. I've been stressed since last October. She depressed, man. I'm not sober. I've been blowing hard since October. You know, like I'm showing y'all, like it's a descent. You know, it's not a digression. I'm not digressing. It's a descent.
Redemptive suffering. We
I'm
talked about this the other day. Like your test, well, better yet, your test under the rubric of redemptive suffering becomes your testimony, but that testimony helps someone else get through their test.
Mm-hmm.
The way that I read this or listen to this, that's what that is.
Mm-hmm.
That's Pastor Danny, like you say, being full self-disclosure, stepping off of that pedestal, which you never placed yourself on. This is in any rhetorical situation, it is a negotiation between the speaker and the audience. You never put yourself on the pedestal other than to say, I love, you know what I'm saying? I'm worth something.
Yeah.
But when you call yourself Pastor Danny, people put you, oh, he's led a perfect life. Or better yet, now there's nothing wrong with his life.
Yeah.
He's far removed from this and he don't understand. Or he prayed his way out of it. That ain't how prayer and faith works. And what I got from it is that you understand that, like through all of it, like right next to the gutter is glory to God from the beginning of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that self-awareness is indicative of somebody who either explicitly or implicitly understands their suffering as redemptive or on a trajectory for a certain type of redemption, if not just for themselves, for other people listening.
Yeah, and man, I was blessed while I was in to, you know, when I accepted my calling, I accepted in its totality. You know, and it wasn't, you know, I mean, they talk about jailhouse religion. I didn't, you know, lean into my calling until 6 years into my sentence. So I still was in, you know, prison, going through some changes, joined a gang for the first time in prison, you know, started, you know, trying to assimilate into that. I was still trying to find out, you know, who I was, you know, because in all modesty, like I don't, you know, this was 1996. Pac had just died, you know, Biggie had just died, right? And here I am, this young African-American man who, you know, was convicted of shooting off-duty police officer during a robbery, who was shot himself during the process, right? This is like, you know, from a street standpoint, you know, this is some Purple Heart type shit, right? I was celebrated, you know, and decorated in prison, and I didn't have the courage to be like, nah, fam, like, I'm a stick-up boy, yeah. I'll rob the hell out of you. I'll sell some dope, or I would, you know, all that. But like a shooter, if I had to, I would. But like that wasn't necessarily my thing, and I didn't have the courage to tell people the real story. You know, like, yeah, I was brave enough to run up in there, but you know, once fam shot me, you know, rest is so like, man, it was like, whoa, this is a different ball game. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't plan for this, and in all the robberies I had done, like, I wasn't the guy that like was trigger happy. I didn't like to shoot because I knew that changed the trajectory of the charges.
Yeah.
You know, it's armed robbery, you know, I can do some workhouse time, but you discharge that pistol, fam, and now you look at, you know, some calendars, and you know, that was my calendar. And so this has been, you know, God got a hold of me, and this is what God told me. It was like, you know, I'm gonna use you to, you know, he told me, so I want you to be to others when nobody has been to you. That's what he told me. And it's just about whatever that is, you know what I'm saying? Wherever the lack, wherever that is, you know, and not that I'm some, you know, some monolithic character that, you know, carries this mantle. I'm, you know, at any time, spirit, creator, God, the holy, whatever you want to, you know, I call or identify as. Anytime, you know, God has done something great for a people, God has always raised up one from among us. You know? From Islam to Prophet Muhammad to, you know, Christianity to, you know, Moses and David's and Paul's, you know, it was always one from among them. And, you know, God was just sharing like, yo, I just, you know, want you to be one of the ones from among them, you know, because God won't leave us without a witness. You know, that's my personal belief. And this project, bro, wasn't written for the church. It wasn't written to glorify God in the traditional ways of Shabbaking God, right? This also isn't a bait and switch. This isn't some tactic or tool that I'm using to try to bait people into my faith or into my church or any of that. This is me leaning into the full narrative of God telling me to go out into all of the world and proclaim. I'm just proclaiming, bro. You know what I'm saying? This is my gospel. All of us have a gospel. No matter what you subscribe, all of us have a story. All of us, have an epistle. We are, the living book, if you will, right? And this is mine. I wrote this project for my sons. So that, in the years ahead, when they ask, because I know the stories, just like I heard stories about my dad growing up, when people say, oh, dad, your dad was this, or just like you said, you Google my name and there's all type of stuff out there. They could say, this is what my father said happened. And Street Confessions is the introduction to a larger project that I'm doing. I just didn't want to jump out with, with this comprehensive, dense project of my life. People are like, man, who the hell is this nigga? Like, I respect the art form too much to disrespect it like that.
But you can't, okay, one thing I cannot get away from in this album or talking to you. Yo, you're a very educated man. No matter how, I mean, not just in terms of degrees, but you really do have a deep understanding and awareness of yourself and the world around you. It comes across most notably on the song Aces. Can you tell me what that acronym stands for and what that song is about? Because that's at the heart of this narrative.
Yeah, ACEs is an acronym. It's a therapeutic term. It's an assessment that stands for adverse childhood experiences. And basically what the assessment is that, it's a series of questions that, is able to gauge and or assess the adverse experiences that you've had in your childhood prior to the age of 18. And then depending on how many adverse childhood experiences that you've had, it then scores you, and then it gives you a diagnosis, if you will, or prognosis, if you will, that says that, you're likely to perpetuate this particular kind of pattern and or experience. And this is out here and exists. And I came into contact with that information probably within the last decade. And I was just like, wow, man, that was, a little more than last decade, but I was just like, wow, that's just like, man. And to think, my mom used to ask me, when I remember the first time, I talk about, I can laugh now, but I talk about on the song Double Life, where my mom, comes and gets me off the Ave in front of Dante's house, talking about, oh, keep your ass from outside, Dante, like that type of stuff. Yeah. Like, I remember when I, caught my first dope case, as I spoke about, she came down to see me and was just like, what the fuck is wrong with you? I mean, that was her exact words, like, what the fuck is wrong with you? She was like, you have everything you could ever want. Like, you live in a house, you go to the best schools, like, you wear the best clothing, like, what's wrong? And, I gave her an answer that, between, I would dare to say, the beginning of Blackness and probably 2010, you couldn't say this to a Black mom. I don't know, right? you know why the hell you did. And, and I didn't realize that, my prefrontal cortex had yet to be developed. My personality hadn't been crystallized yet. And with adverse childhood experiences, that decreases and slows down the development of your prefrontal cortex, which helps you, rationalize, process thinking. The adverse childhood experiences impacts the gray matter around your brain. And the more adverse childhood experiences you had, the less amount that you have of this. And so, like, this real clinical and physiological, or I should say biopsychosocial factors that contribute to this, right? Yeah. And this is just one of the pieces that help to articulate that. And so for me, ACEs, and then I go right into the song saying manic, now I'm stressing, episode depression, kept that shit to self, my coping skills, I just suppress it. Trauma in my childhood, nigga, that's just pubescent. Like, looking back, I realized how much I compartmentalize. And seeing my mother domestically abused in a relationship, right? Seeing my father, fall in love with the dope game and, and raise me through money and not through a moral compass, right? Seeing my aunties and uncles who I loved and adored be displaced by addiction. You know what I'm saying? Like, just watching just all of it unfold. And I'm not knowing, I put this how I felt over here, I put that how I felt over there. And I finally got to a point, was like, man, this is too much. I'm in a full-blown episode. And I'm depressed and I don't know why. And the ACEs, helps to explain and, add color in the lines, if you will, of it. And
I can only imagine, like, being 17 years old and all of this death so close to you.
Yeah.
All of this, you're not even like talking about all the other stuff. The Ave was hot.
Yeah.
Our street was a hot block, and it wasn't nothing but 3 houses making it hot. Your house, my house, and Corey Jackson's across the street. Like,
yeah.
St. Paul was real. We think of Rondo as a Black community, which it was, but it's a high concentration of Black people, not totally Black. It is still, it didn't get gentrified. Selby didn't get gentrified. The white people just started coming out the house and feeling comfortable to come out the house.
True.
The fact that you're, as a grown man, coming to that awareness in your own personal life that, oh, that leads to this and led to that. Those are, like you say, it's cathartic for you, but it's enlightening to an audience who understands that.
Yeah.
I would think.
Yeah. It becomes extremely enlightening. I didn't mention, I have a sacred site tour business that I do here that tells the story, the ancestral story of the footprint of our people landing in Minnesota for the first time. And so I take scores of large groups of, whether it's faith folks, predominantly white folks, that come through, and we go throughout the neighborhood, and I tell the real story from my perspective and vantage point. And now the place where my crime happened, the VFW, is now the Rondo Commemorative Plaza. So, and I remember the first time I took a group of folks there after it was dedicated, and I told the story of Rondo, and I surprisingly introduced the fact, because most folks don't know my crime or what I did, because a lot of folks have met me as Pastor Danny. I stand in the exact location where the shooting happened, at the plaza. And, and I articulate and I set up the story in a way that has you engaged, and then you're just totally slapped by the fact that, what? You did what right here? And this is Rondo history, though. This is Rondo history. And the fact that, to be blessed with this opportunity to carry these narratives, to carry these stories, as I said in one of the songs, my sons will know that, this is real Rondo history. I think it's 1896, 80, like, this is real Rondo history here, Yeah.
Well, on that note, because if I keep talking to you, I'll keep talking to you all damn night.
Yes, sir.
You call yourself on what a track, a recovered real nigga. And I love that phrasing. What is the RRN, who is a Renaissance man, Danny Givens, going to do next?
Yeah, so there's a larger project that's coming out. I've already got my second project is almost done, called Street Art, which you'll see. This first project I did was, no features. Just wanted to show folks that, I love the art. I, am able to perform the art. Street art is this, mosaic template, if you will, where, it'll still be this close to chest, in my heart stories. But I'm, inviting other folks that, artists across the Twin Cities that I rock with, to come in and, do some partnership. There's working on a visual companion to the project, as well as a written version of such. There's a curriculum being crafted right now for youth and young adults who have been survivors of, this particular kind of trauma, to engage and unpack, the grief, the trauma, and even more importantly, to create space to celebrate the victories and the transformations and the transitions. Because, bro, to be honest with you, man, there is, when I got off parole, there was no place for me to go to celebrate, like, for real, where somebody could be able to appreciate. Like, I could have went to the bar and probably got a double on the house, right? and that's cool. But like to be able to go like, yo, man, I got married again. I'm a father. I'm a husband. You know, I'm in a career position right now. I'm a government employee, right? I have a full career. Like there's no places to go and celebrate. But if I want to get into that other stuff, there's all these places to go. So the recovering real nigga piece is about like my wife and I were often out, and you know, because of the kind of the energy that we carry, you know, when you have the energy of the holy or an energy that's greater than you on you, like it draws, you know, all kinds of energy, right? It just is what it is. So we'll be out, and from any, you know, any given moment, you know, somebody come over and just, you know, whether asking me to, you know, like interrupting the conversation, me and my wife, and ask for prayer in the club, or like, you know, guy coming over, you know, trying to compliment my wife and my daughter. And, you know, I then have to check myself because, you know, that I have a real nigga moment. And, right? And it's like, you know, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute, you know, I don't need to, you know, come there. And it's just about leaning into the fact of that, you know, yeah, I no longer do what I used to do, but I am who I am.
Yeah.
And I should be able to, I had to suppress Danny. I had to suppress quote unquote RRN, you know, my whole life because I didn't know how to be my full self. And I know there's all type of, you know, narratives in our community about that particular phrase. And I get that, but you know, just coming from where I come from, like this is a, you know, a term that speaks volumes to me. And the fact that I name that every day, it gives me permission to give myself an olive branch.
Mm-hmm.
One clear example, BLM. I'm one of the founders of BLM Minneapolis here. And during the height of, you know, Philando, Jamar Clark, all that, uh, man, there was white supremacists that had broken into my home. They had broken into my cars. I had been followed. I had been trailed by Homeland Security, FBI, all that, right? I was down at Harriet Island in my car one day, bro, and just sitting back chilling. And this dude tried to break in my car while I was in it. You know, and it just, I was back. I mean, I hate to say Lil Dan is that person, right? But I was back in Lil Dan. I was back for the album's sake. I was back in Lil down ass nigga. Like you got the right one, baby, Ray Charles moment, right? Like, and I got active, bro. And I had, you know, I'm already on edge because these white, you know, this ain't like gangbanging where I know I'm beefing with Ron in there, right? I know Ron drive. I know, you know, I know how he get out, how he move. I don't know how these white people, they can be anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to keep a little hammer underneath my seat, not a hammer as an actual physical hammer.
No, I know, I already know.
I had to articulate that, but I had a little hammer. BMW comes with the car. BMW comes with a toolkit in the back, and I had a little hammer. And man, I grabbed that hammer and went to work on this white man. You know, I got a scar on my hand behind it. You know, I tried to kill this white man. I said it in all modesty because, you know, and I caught myself, bro. Because this is broad daylight and at Harriet Island Park. Like, you know, a black man with a hammer at a white man. And this is like, yo, I have to be able to name the fact that, you know, I'm not recovering from the streets. I'm not recovering from alcohol. I'm not recovering from drug use. That ain't necessarily, I was addicted to being a real nigga, you know, like, and I don't know no other way to say that. Like, that was the culture. And we need, I'm serious, man. We need like
I'm giggling because I know you, Pastor. I know Lil Dan.
You're a professor, so you have to know what I'm talking about. Like, you be in these spaces, and you know, even like I do a lot of space. I'm in a lot of predominantly white spaces where I'm the anomaly, right? Yeah. And you know, and it's just when, you know, some stuff is said, and it's just like, you know, and I just get that real nigga line across my forehead. You know, it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, just like maybe.
So, talking to.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. And the balance of like legit, you know, with that comes the grandiosity and all that, you know, the machismo and all that comes, and have to, as a full grown man, as a mature man, like, dude, I'm not 17, I'm not 8, I don't have nothing to prove, any of that.
You
like
did it on the album too,
you know, man.
What life is life. You got it. It's that balance between, all right, here's what I gotta do, but y'all really don't understand what I would do. Don't play me. You know, they say, Mama said don't play with it. So don't play with me.
Bottom line, that's what you said. You know, so it's
100% facts.
it's been a blessing, man. This project has been so like it's been so liberating, bro. Like it's been so liberating, and I've been blessed to see how folks have responded, you know, and continue to respond to it. I released this project as a hobby. You know, this is what I love to do. You know, some folks like writing, some folks like working out, some folks like dance, some people like, you know, drumming. You know, this is what I love to do. And, you know, and so I'm just blessed to have created something that people like, you know.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine creating something people were like, man, get that shit out of here. I don't you CDs, you know, so like
No, bro, you did not make a frisbee.
man, that 5 second rule. You know, that first 5 seconds, you
Whoa,
ain't
whoa, yeah, like
that was
if you would have been garbage on the mic, I'd have been like, man, I appreciate you, bro. You know what I'm saying? And kept it pushing.
man.
No, for real. Like I appreciate your time and you sitting down and chopping it up with me. And I wish you the utmost success on this project and all your endeavors, bruh. From a friend from childhood to grown men, I respect your journey and I appreciate your growth, fam. Good luck and God bless you and your family. I can't wait to hear and see what comes next.
Well, it's gonna be visuals coming and all that. I appreciate you, bro. I mean, you are the first to get any exclusive interview from me on the project. So this is history. I love it, man. I followed, you know, your journey since I've come home from prison and been able to see, you know, I mean, I've always loved you and your family, man, next door.